right, it's my pleasure to introduce one of our keynote speakers, a man that we've all been excited to see come. James Oschman, PhD, cell biology, formed Nature's Own Research Association in New Hampshire. Jim, is that where that was formed? That's it, New Hampshire. He's been involved in plunging into the depths of energy medicine like no one else that I know. And he's done amazing studies. He's addressed our conference in Syntonics, I think 2 or 3 times. Every time just dazzling the audience. And Jim, we really are such a pleasure to have you here and bring us up to date on your latest thinking and your latest illumination of what's happening with energy medicine. So thank you for coming.
Okay. I have been inspired by Syntonics. I was very impressed with a talk that Ray Gottlieb gave many years ago in St. Louis, and I got very curious about how this could possibly work. And I wrote an article for the Journal of Syntonic Optometry, and been going at it ever since. Just to make sure that I cover this, I'm going to do it at the beginning rather than put it off to the end. And this is special for you in case any of you or your loved ones have a medical issue that is difficult to deal with, or you want to prevent such things. This can save your life or the life of a loved one. Some people like to simultaneously connect with the earth and the sun and the sea, and that's not a bad idea. I gave a talk in London at the Sutherland Cranial College. And after my talk, I went downstairs and there was a guy there who knew me and had read my books and was very smart. And he had these little boxes of seawater called Kinton, Quinton. And he told me the story. He was in Africa. He ate some roadkill. He was deathly ill. He was going to die. And somebody gave him some vials of seawater, which he drank, and the next day he was better. So that fascinated him. He went to Paris and he knocked on the door of the manufacturer of this stuff at 2 a.m. and they talked all night, and he became the North American distributor for it. And he arranged for me to visit the Kinton laboratories in Alicante, Spain. And what they do, Rene Kinton discovered that there are places in the Atlantic Ocean that form a vortex. And you can get an idea of where this is because this is Cape Cod. Woods Hole is right there. And Provincetown is there. So this is a vortex. It's created by single-celled animals and plants, plankton and zooplankton, and they swim in a circle. And they're very tiny, but there are jillions of them. And they get chased by other larger things that want to eat them. And the whole thing creates this vortex that goes down to the bottom of the ocean and scoops up minerals. And it's the richest biosphere on the planet. Fish come and lay their eggs. Whales go there to breed. It's just amazing. This seawater is just full of goodies. And so the plant is in Alicante. It was originally in France. Kinton Laboratories, Kinton, I visited them and saw the whole thing. And these are the vials. This is isotonic and this is hypertonic. If you're interested, look it up on the web and look for original Kinton because there are some fakes. And there it is. You snap the little vial, the little tip off the vial. Rene Kinton was a very famous French physician. When he died, the president of France read the eulogy at his funeral. People who took this water during the plague in the early part of the 1900s didn't get the plague. He discovered that you can inject it because it's isotonic and it's sterile. They cold filter it. And children with developmental disorders responded amazingly to this stuff. And here's a person who didn't have a good start and ended up okay, thanks to Kinton. This is a clinic in Barcelona where people bring their children who have respiratory problems. They handle all kinds of respiratory issues. Kids get asthma, and they go and they inhale the seawater, the vapor. And it's not publicized, but they also do the injections for kids that are in trouble. They're pretty quiet about that. So that's something that you could know about. Very good if you have indigestion and so on. The other thing is the barefoot revolution. When we shifted from leather-soled shoes to rubber and plastic, we created a health problem. And the sales, you can trace the sales of athletic shoes like Nike and so on over the last 40 years. The numbers of shoes sold and the diabetes epidemic trails right along. So we are missing something, and that something comes from the earth. There's a book about it. If any of you want it, I'll send it to you. I wrote the foreword. I've been involved in research. There's about a dozen of us, a dozen scientists working on this, and we've narrowed down the changes. And basically what happens is when you connect to the earth, you connect to the rhythms of the earth, and you connect to the electrons in the earth. When I started the project, I didn't know the earth was full of electrons, but it is. They come from the sun. And it's free. Just take your shoes and socks off and walk in the grass. We discovered various things. Well, whoop. Okay. First thing we found was that people slept better. They sleep better because they have less pain. They have less pain because the electrons neutralize their inflammation. They relax. Measurements of the autonomic nervous system, brain waves, and so on. Ridiculously rapid healing of injuries, increased heart rate variability, and extremely important for anyone who has cardiovascular issues is reduction in blood viscosity, which is correlated with every kind of cardiovascular issue. Less clumping of the blood, carries more oxygen, everything works better. And there are various ways of connecting to the earth. There's a foot pad for under your computer desk. This wire goes out the window to a rod stuck in the ground. This is a bracelet goes on your ankle or on your wrist. There's another one for your chest. If you have asthma, this is a flip-flop that has a conductive plug at kidney 1. And kidney 1, Goddess put kidney 1 on the bottom of the foot so that we could connect with the earth. Nice mattresses with silver fibers woven in it that are connected to a wire that goes to the ground. So all this stuff works, and it's very good. And now there are shoes called Plugs, Pluggz, and I have one flip-flop and very nice shoes for women and even for men. And women like them because they're comfortable and they look good, and they're very healthy because they have this little plug in here that connects you to the earth when you're out walking around. And if you want some, put Jim in the discount code box, and you'll get a, I think, 10 or 20% discount. So that's just for your information. So I'm very glad to be here, and thank you, Randy Marie. Thank you for inviting me. Very much appreciated. Thank you, Kennedy, for all of your work and all of your helpers. for making this happen. This is delightful. I appreciate it. And I like color. Yeah. Okay, big question. What is light? Here's a book, The Reflexive Universe. Judy Kosevich. I had this book and I couldn't read it. It was too thick. And Judy said, read it. So I read it. And it's very interesting. So if you want to know about light, this is a very valuable book. I can tell you that it won't be the easiest thing you ever read. Light, because it's primary, must be unqualified, impossible to describe, because it is antecedent to the contrasts needed to describe it. Oh dear. The photon, having no bulk, can shrink any amount. It follows that a single photon can store unlimited energy and information by getting smaller. Isn't that amazing? This is one of the most surprising things in quantum physics, that the smaller the photon, the more energy and information it can carry. And what I'm going to tell you is that is where we get our energy and our information, from photons, which doesn't surprise any of you. So most of us I certainly live in the world of Newtonian physics, the world of matter, time, space, charge, and mass. Mass decreases as size is reduced. Little things weigh less, have less mass, and so on. And they can go at any velocity from 0 to almost the speed of light. The quantum world, the world of light, there is no time, space, charge, or mass. Energy increases as the size or the wavelength is reduced. Light travels at a constant velocity, and it never stops, except some people are slowing it down. All of the many-faceted properties of light point in one direction to the ultimate centrality or primacy of light as the origin of everything. So everything in the human body is made of light, and your therapeutic techniques intervene at the level of creation, where light is acting to create living matter. A universe of billiard balls could not create life. Couldn't do it. Quantum physics has discovered that the quantum of action is an activity innate in the universe that can do this, can create life. And by the time we're done, you will perhaps know what he means, what Young means by the quantum of action. Uncertainty or play is the most fundamental entity of all, and is more basic than the fundamental particles of the universe. I like that. Let's have fun. These are some friends of mine, Piran Baer and his wife Susanna. They have the Institute of Applied Meditation on the Heart. They're located in Phoenix, Arizona. I gave their commencement address to their second class that graduated from their University of the Heart. And they have written a nice book, Living from the Heart. It's heart-centered meditation. And it's very powerful, wonderful stuff, and I highly recommend it. It comes from the Sufi tradition. Piran and Susanna are the present holders of the Sufi line that came from Parabalai Khan, who was the head of the Sufis in North America. Piran did a study in Germany. He knew that the heart gives off light. Fritz Popp actually measured, and some of his colleagues measured light coming from the heart. And so he wanted to see what meditation would do. And so he sat in front of a photon counter in a cold room without his shirt on, and just meditated. And the photon counter-measured about 20 photons per second, and he sat there all day, and it wasn't very impressive. And so he came back the next day, but the next day he learned that his host, that his son, was sick. So Traian decided to put his son in the light that was coming from his heart. The son was in some other part of the house, but that's what Traian did, and out came 100,000 photons per second. So the basic discovery, a specific person with an actual need must be identified as a receiver of the transmitted light to get a good output from the heart. So we are radiant, luminescent beings. Every part of us, our whole bodies and every molecule and every atom is giving off and taking in radiation, radiant light. Radiance, the quality or state of being radiant, or a measure of the amount of electromagnetic radiation leaving or arriving at a point on a surface. This is going on inside of us all the time. Luminescence, emission of light by a substance, not caused by heat. Glowing, shining, fluorescent, radiant, luminous. That's us. So here's the problem that I want to talk about. One is the effects of frequencies or colors. How does a particular frequency produce a healthy effect on the body? We don't know for sure. We have ideas. And I think I'm closing in on it, and it has to do with quantum coherence. And also the blueprint of life, which is the blueprint that the body references when it does healing. It tries to get the body back to the way it was originally designed. So the blueprint is very important. There is a paper that came out recently. Electromagnetic fields act via activation of voltage-gated calcium channels to produce beneficial or adverse effects. I've been interested for a long time, in fact ever since Robert Becker's book on that describes how electromagnetic fields are a double-edged sword. They can be healing and they can cause problems. And I've been interested in the electromagnetic environment, cell towers, cell phones, radar, television, Wi-Fi, all that stuff that is bombarding us, and if it doesn't affect you, you're lucky, because a lot of people are really sick from this stuff. So this is one model, calcium, voltage-gated calcium channels, and there have been a number of studies, many studies, and it looks like this is a good candidate, and there are others. I did a study with Carol McMakin. She does frequency-specific microcurrent, and we published this study on tissue softening with frequency-specific microcurrent. And here's what happens. Here, for example, treating a sinus condition, she uses these graphite gloves, and often she puts them inside of a moist towel. And so for the sinus condition, there's a moist towel with a graphite glove over the forehead and one under the neck. And she tries various frequencies that have worked in the past until she senses a softening of the tissue. You can feel it on an arm or on a leg, anywhere. The tissue goes soft. It's a wonderful discovery. Some of you may have noticed this in your work, that the tissue softens when you get the right color of light. Anybody ever notice anything like that?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah?
Yes.
Oh, good. Because I think this applies to lots of different therapies. It really helps with frequency-specific microcurrent because she uses two frequencies, and the position of the gloves is important. So there are a lot of variables. And so to find out how to treat a condition she's never treated before, she uses the tissue softening as a sign that she has the right setup. Here is back, shoulder, and neck issues. This is not manipulation. she is feeling the changes that take place, the softening of the tissue when she has the right frequency. And this is a crossover setup for the lumbar spine. 2 electrode patches on the back and 2 more on the front that you can't see. And the softening, the tissue softening, is very valuable for teaching people how to do this work. Because when they get the frequency right, they can feel the softening. Then you change the frequency or turn it off, it stiffens up again. Put the frequency back in, and it softens again. So very valuable teaching and research guide. We talk about resonance. Resonance is a great subject. It's a fantastic subject. What is resonating? Here is something amazing. This is Pioneer 10, the first man-made object that left the solar system. Off it goes. And in 1983, it left our solar system. On the 30th anniversary of its launch, NASA sent a message. It was 7.4 billion miles away. A response was received 22 hours and 6 minutes later. This is a 40-watt transmitter. Can you imagine a 40-watt light bulb 7.6 billion miles away? And you can still see it. That's how far away it was when it sent its last signal. Now you heard Claude the other day, and he described how light there are two kinds of light, 2 kinds of subtle energy. One is the speed of light, and the other is faster. I have an idea about this. I'm interested in Claude's idea that there's a signal that goes backwards in time. I have a little trouble coming to grips with that. Maybe you guys, that's simple and obvious to you, but what I think happens, and there is evidence for this, that when the transmitter sends a signal to the antenna on the Earth, it sends a pilot wave. The instant the signal is sent, a signal is received at the antenna that says a signal is coming. And then, some 22 hours and 6 minutes later, the electromagnetic field arrives, and aha, there's a signal. Pilot wave.
What sort of evidence is a pilot wave?
What's that?
You said there is evidence for this. What sort of evidence is there of a pilot wave being transmitted?
Yes, de Broglie talked about it, and Hans Tetrode, who was a good friend of Albert Einstein's, published a paper in Zeitschrift für Physik in 1922, and he said this: when I see light from a star 100 light years away, and I know that that light was sent before I was born, not only I do know that the light was emitted 100 years ago, but also a group of atoms in the star knew that the light would enter my eye 100 years later, before I even existed. What an incredible statement. And he talked to Einstein about it, and Einstein said, I think you're right. So understanding what that subtle energy is that goes faster than light, in fact, scalar waves are not waves. They don't have a velocity. They are instantaneous. They go everywhere in the universe instantaneously. And that's how everything is connected to everything else. It's called entanglement. It's the hallmark of quantum physics, entanglement. And a woman by the name of Gilder has written a wonderful book on entanglement, describing the conversations between the leading physicists of the last century as they talked and developed the ideas of quantum physics through their conversations. There's one great story in there where Schrödinger and Einstein were on the trolley in Copenhagen trying to get to the Niels Bohr Institute, and they were so engaged in their conversation that they forgot to get off. And they ended up at the end of the line, and so they came back, and again, they missed a stop and went to the other end of the line. They went back and forth. Scientists get, they get engrossed. Resonance. You have your car key, your electronic car key. When you use it, think of resonance. Think of molecules that interact without touching. I see the body as a webwork of electromagnetic fields between molecules. Molecules are talking to each other. We have a lock and key model of hormone receptor interactions where the key fits into the lock. Everybody's put a key in a lock. It's an easy model to grasp. It's probably completely wrong. It can't work that way. It has to be much faster than that, or we wouldn't be able to get out of bed in the morning. Resonance, your TV clicker, and so on. Here's an example of molecular resonance. This young girl from Colorado has a dairy allergy that is so severe, she not only can she not eat any dairy, she can't get near a person who has eaten dairy. She could die. It's that serious. This is an example of molecules that are acting on the body through resonance, through electromagnetic resonance. So here she is, she does her schoolwork at home, she sends a robot to school, the robot comes down the hall, and people say hi to her. This is her boyfriend. He has to brush his teeth before he kisses her. So this is an example of how and what I'm going to tell you, what I now see, is that we are sensitive right down to zero. We are sensitive right down to the quantum level and maybe below quantum level. So her condition, Lauren's condition, demonstrates this incredible sensitivity as occurs in many different healing modalities, craniosacral, external homeopathy, when you don't actually have to take the remedy. Someone can just bring it into the room in a sealed vial, and it has its effect. Electromagnetic sensitivity, aromatherapy, healing through the biofield, low-energy neurofeedback, herbal medicine. Low-energy neurofeedback is very interesting. This is the lens method of Oaks in California. What they discovered is when they record brainwaves with electrodes on the scalp, the recording device makes noise, electromagnetic noise, which actually goes down the wires and into the brain. So at the same time you're recording, you're stimulating. And they decided to take advantage of that and use some algorithms. They do QEEG, they map the brain, they find places where there's inactivity, and the algorithm sends specific signals into those areas, and it's very therapeutic. And they decreased the intensity of the signals, the feedback signals, and the lower the signals, the bigger the effects, until they got down below thermal noise to a level that shouldn't do anything. And that had really big effects. And that's where we're at. That's where our living molecules are in terms of their sensitivity. Below thermal noise, one of the implications is our standards for radiation exposure to microwaves and radar and things like that. Our standards are all based on thermal effects. It's the wrong thing to base the standards on, because the critical factor is frequency. And now the government is having big discussions about should we lower the safety levels down to where the Russians were 20 years ago, because there's an interesting thing. In socialist countries, the health of the worker is all important. In the capitalist countries, the health of the business is all important. Therefore, the government is maneuvered to have easy standards on things like radiation. And this is potential disaster for us. Science can't progress unless we're willing to explore new worlds. We can't explore new worlds while staying in the comfort of the old ones. So fasten your seatbelt. We're going to go in hyperdrive. Don't follow where the path may lead. Go instead where there is no path and leave a trail. And that's what a lot of you people are doing. And I love it. And that's why it's exciting to spend time with you. So what are these frequencies doing? Well, the blueprint of life is a very important subject. I brought an acorn from New Hampshire. What did I do with it? Oh, here it is. This little itty-bitty New Hampshire acorn can become an oak forest. Is all the information and energy to make an oak forest in this little acorn? Well, of course not. Inside every acorn is an entire forest. Inside an egg, and the male has to do something, and a little bit comes from the male, is the information. I mean, we are good for something. The information to create an organism. It's amazing. You laugh. You should hear my wife. So this is a major mystery in biology. The healing of an injury has to reference the original blueprint that enabled the body to grow into its adult form. And this brings embryology, developmental biology, wound healing, cancer research together at the forefront of medical theory and practice, and I think we can figure this out. And by the time I'm done, maybe we'll be there. The effectiveness of any science-based medical system depends on detailed and accurate understandings of these developmental phenomena. At this point, we know what the blueprint isn't. DNA is not the blueprint of the organism. It's in the textbooks. Totally wrong. Ontology does not recapitulate phylogeny. This is in all the biology books. They say that at one point when you were an embryo, you looked like a fish, and a little later you developed into a frog, and so on, and then you became you. Bogus story. Ernst Haeckel cooked it up, made drawings. He admitted that they were fake, but it's still in the biology books. The growth of an organism is not brought about by a set of linear cause and effect events like the construction of an automobile on an assembly line. Something else is going on. Differentiation is not a one-way street. The old idea was that when a cell becomes committed to be a pancreas cell, for example, it can't revert to the undifferentiated state. Not true anymore. The organism does not, in fact, develop in the usual way we have thought about it. How do we know this? We know this from the work of two great embryologists, Paul Weiss and Eric Schmidt. And Paul Weiss said in 1939 in his classic book, growth is the creation of mass, whereas morphogenesis is the shaping of that mass. See, the thing is, we have developmental biologists and embryologists and so on, and they study the development of the organism, but they don't understand how it develops. And they've been doing it for a long time, and it's a good job, and it pays well, but they have not figured it out. Schmidt's two books, and this one is virtually unreadable, but the recent translation is readable and good, The Ontogenetic Basis of Human Anatomy. And what Schmidt did was he studied embryos very carefully and drew them. And a lot of embryologists don't actually look at embryos, but he did. So development, according to him, and according to the epigenetic model, the standard model is inside out. Development controlled by the DNA. DNA is on top. DNA is in charge. The Gleichschmidt and epigenetic model is an outside-in direction of development. The environment is active, the genes are reactive. The DNA is on tap. So the environment is controlling the developmental process.
Lamarck was not mistaken.
What's that?
Lamarck was not so mistaken. Lamarck was not so mistaken.
Yeah.
Not so mistaken?
Yeah, he didn't do such a mistake in his ideas, saying that the environment can affect the genotype.
That's it? Read the biology of belief. The conventional theory attempts to squeeze all of the hereditary characteristics of organisms into the genes. There are problems. Hereditary equals genetic, but only about 1% of the human genome codes for proteins. What does the rest of it do? The so-called junk DNA. The total amount of DNA inherited has little to do with the complexity of the organism. For example, some amphibians have 100 times more DNA than others. The lily plant has 30 times more DNA than a human cell. Isn't that amazing? So, what's going on? Energy fields organize morphogenesis. Now, I said energy fields. Here's where my personality splits. Because energy fields are classical electromagnetism. And we need to become aware of the quantum story, or we're going to be lost in the dust. So I have to catch myself when I'm talking Newtonian or classic electromagnetism because it's not the whole story. So these are scientists who talked about energy fields organizing morphogenesis. They were called developmental fields, embryonic fields, morphogenetic fields, mitogenic fields, and so on. Hans Spemann, the fields weren't energy fields. They were regions or domains in the developing embryo. Alexander Gervich, who I'm sure all of you are familiar with. The formative process takes place in a field, this time in the usage of the physicists that surrounds the embryo. But it's still not a quantum field. We have to talk quantum electrodynamics. A living system consists of the visible egg or embryo in a field. He was brilliant. This is Harold Saxon Burr, professor, and Harold Saxon Burr did what a number of scientists have done. He studied something very conventional. He became a full professor with academic tenure. He couldn't be fired. And then he did what he wanted to do, which was to study energy, which was a no-no. And he concluded, all living things from mice to humans, from seeds to trees, are formed and controlled by fields that can be measured with standard detectors. He wrote a book, The Blueprint for Immortality. He starts out his book by saying that fields equal God. Well, that didn't go over too well in the scientific community. If he had saved that for the last paragraph, it might have been okay, because by then people would have been realizing the power of the fields. Paul Weiss, now here's a story from Paul Weiss. Two individual embryos of the same species. This is one, this is another one. They're followed during the same time period of development and watching where the cells go. The specific regions are the forerunners of specific organs in the embryo. The formation of these organs is predictable, but the cellular migrations are not. So this cell ended up over there, this cell ended up there, this cell ended up there, and so on. The lines connecting the earlier and later stages show the movements of individual cells. You can label them and see where they go. They don't go where it would be logical for them to go to form the organ, but the organ nonetheless forms. So the overall outcome is two adults with virtually identical structures and organs, and the formative processes do not correspond to each other. There's a serious sentence. Determination of the structure and position of an individual cell is a response to its position in the orderly pattern of the future whole, rather than the result of a linear assembly process. The orderly pattern of the future whole. Schmidt reached the same conclusion. This shows the variability in length of embryos, 3,746 embryos, same species, same conditions, they're all over the place. What determines form? How is the orderly pattern of the future whole established? Where do these guys come from? How are they formed? The orderly pattern of the future whole. They're so cute. Morphic fields. Now we come to Sheldon, Rupert Sheldon. A New Science of Life, first published 1981. Memory and morphology. Memory is not in the head. It's not in the brain. Neuroscientists look for memory in the brain. They can't find it, but they know how to look in the brain, so they keep looking there. But they don't find it. It's like the guy who lost his keys and is looking under the street light because he can see there, even though he didn't lose his keys there. Memory and morphology depend on morphic resonance, a resonance across time. When this book came out, Nature magazine reviewed it and said, this book is a candidate for burning. What an awful thing to say. And that just shows you how bitter scientists can be when a new idea comes along. Science depends vitally on new ideas, and scientists absolutely hate new ideas. I like them. That's why I come and hang out with you folks, because you have new ideas. He also wrote Morphic Resonance, The Nature of Formative Causation, and the Presence of the Past, the Habits of Nature. These are brilliant. By the way, Einstein said, condemnation without investigation is the height of ignorance. It's easy to criticize a scientist. It's easy even to undo their life work. It happens all the time. And I don't like that. I want to know what the problem is. If you don't like somebody's work, tell me specifically what is wrong with it. And often they don't have an answer. So all of us in all parts of our bodies are continuously emitting and absorbing information from the morphic field. There it is, the morphic field. Every molecule, every atom in your body is constantly exchanging information with Sheldrake's morphic field. Morphogenetic fields give rise to all forms, he says. Matter acquires form when it resonates with a field. These are the principles. The fields involved are not classical electromagnetic fields. This is where I stopped. When I heard about Sheldrake's work, I said, how do you know? How do you know it's not electromagnetism? I was steeped in electromagnetic field theory. I wanted to know if he proved that these fields were not electromagnetic. Then I learned about quantum fields. Okay. So I'm okay with Sheldrake now. Morphogenetic fields are derived from the body's own past actions and from the structures and actions of ancestors. This is an incredible concept. I like it a lot. It makes more sense than anything else I've ever seen. What this says is that the things that our ancestors did the structures they formed, the structures they invented, the discoveries they made are present in the morphic field. How does the rabbit know not to eat that thing that smells so good? Because his ancestor ate it and got a tummy ache. Why is it that healing is getting easier for therapists to perform? I work with lots of different schools of therapeutics from all over the world, and there's a general thing that's happening, is it's getting easier to do the work and easier to teach the work. Do you notice something like that happening?
Yes.
Is it just because you're getting better at it, or is there something happening in the field? And Sheldrake would say it's in the field. I like this. Fields act across space and time. And these are the fields that Claude Swanson was talking about the other day. What are these fields? They're made from scalar waves. Scalar waves are not waves. Some are waves, some go at a velocity, others are instantaneous. They go from wherever something happens to everywhere in the universe. And physicists talk this way. And if you're interested in this, Konstantin Weil has written a book on scalar waves. And you can get it in German if you wish, or in English, and use websites. And look at what he's got on the cover. He is concerned that these subfields, these underlying energies below the electromagnetic fields, the scalar waves, may be more damaging to us than the actual electromagnetic fields. The morphic field extends throughout space and includes all objects, near and far. So here we go from electrons, protons, atoms, molecules, cells, people, animals, Earth, Moon, Sun, other planets, distant galaxies. This is the cosmology that is emerging, that relates to healing. Modern scholars are looking outside the body for the mechanisms of consciousness. These are leading scholars. These are not kooks. These are real people. I'll introduce you to them. Neuroscientists, philosophers, quantum physicists, cosmologists, cell biologists, astrophysicists, physicians. And here they are. And I'll introduce you, Carl Pribram. He's the fellow who developed the holographic understanding of how memory works in the brain. David Bohm, theoretical physicist. Stuart Hameroff, anesthesiologist. Edgar Mitchell, engineer and astronaut. Harumi Umezawa, quantum physicist. Deepak, Richard Amoroso, cosmology and philosophy. Irving Laszlo, philosopher. Dennis Gabor, inventor of holography. Roger Penrose, physicist. Rudy Schild, astrophysicist. John Veltheim, who developed bodywork. And I include him in this list because I've been working with him. He has developed Body Talk, which is a very interesting and very rapidly growing therapeutic approach. They had 1,000 new members last year. So people love it. They go to a class in a weekend and they go home and they help the members of their family and friends. And it's a powerful method of listening to the body. And John Veltheim is, he's working, he calls it now Quantum Body Talk, and he has been working with some of the world's foremost quantum physicists and philosophers, many of whom are in Brazil, and he has fed me their papers, and I've read them, and it's very interesting. I'm quite excited, and later this year I will go to Malta, and John and I will talk about quantum physics, and he will describe to his students for the first time his methods of treating cancer, which are highly effective. He learned the various cancer genes from one of his students, who was a molecular geneticist, and he can switch off the cancer genes, and he can do it over the telephone. And so he's going to describe these methods to his students. I'm excited about that. And he has to be on this list because he is the guy who has taken the work of all these other guys, no women, I don't know why that is. He's the one who's taken their work and applied it to therapeutics. This is quantum physics in action in the world of therapeutics. So I went to Cambridge, Massachusetts, to some friends who have a foundation, and they wanted me to view this movie called Thrive. And it's a pretty interesting movie, an unconventional documentary that tells what's really going on in our world by following the money upstream and uncovering the global consolidation of power in nearly every aspect of our lives. And this film was made by Foster Gamble, who's heir to the Procter Gamble fortune, and he decided not to be a Wall Street banker. He decided to expose what's going on in the world, and he's brilliant. So I went to watch this movie, and Foster Gamble came in on Skype, and we talked with him. And during the film, we had a little discussion, and this fellow Rudy Schild, got up and talked about consciousness. And he said, there's no dark energy. Dark energy is a concept that the cosmologists created because they needed something to fill in their equations. But they made it up. Dark energy in the universe, he said, is consciousness.
You mean the black holes, like the dark energy, like the black holes in the universe, or what do you mean?
No, dark energy, there's too much matter and too much energy in the universe. And they don't know what it is or where it came from. So the cosmologists have been struggling this for a long time. Rudy is a leading cosmologist. He's editor of the Journal of Cosmology. He directs this telescope on Mount Hopkins in Arizona, which is the largest telescope in the world that does entirely spectroscopy. It studies the light from different distant stars and galaxies. When I picked myself up off the floor, after he said that it's consciousness, I said, "Sir, do you and your colleagues talk like this in public?" And he said, "Yes. As a matter of fact, we have just published a special issue of the Journal of Cosmology that's all about this concept," which I acquired as fast as I could. So this is his telescope, and here's the squiggles he gets from distant. So he's trying to figure out what's going on out there. And this is the book, Consciousness and the Universe, Quantum Physics, Evolution, Brain, and Mind, Journal of Cosmology, Harvard University, 2011. This is an amazing document. Morphic resonance. I'll give you an example of one of the things that they found out. They sent a rocket, they sent a satellite to measure the temperature of the universe. And from measurements of the temperature, they determined what the composition of the universe was 300 million years after the Big Bang. I'm not sure there ever was a Big Bang, but that's okay. Anyway, the young universe was homogeneous. It had no planets, no stars, no galaxies, and gradually those material objects emerged from the void, from the background of the universe. And quantum physics says that processes like that can't happen. If you observe something like that, you're part of the process. It requires an observer for things like that to happen. So that's part of the reasoning behind consciousness in the universe. Morphic resonance takes place between the fabric of space. Space has a fabric. This stuff around us and penetrating us has a fabric. It's not empty at all. And morphic resonance takes place between these fabrics. These are different models of the fabric of space, and they resonate with the structures in the human body. All therapies influence the vital exchanges between the body and the morphic field. This is a hypothesis, by the way, that I'm putting together. What I do is I look at lots of different lines of thinking and see how they fit together. That's what I do. I like that. It's interesting. Everything is vibrating. The frequencies range over 81 octaves, from infrasound to gamma rays. Each object has a resonant frequency comparable to a tone in the world of music. There's a nice children's song that goes with this. All God's critters have a place in the choir. Some sing high, some sing low, some sing out loud on the telephone wire. Some just clap their hands or paws or whatever they got now. All God's critters have a place in the choir. I love it. Those things. So morphic resonance takes place between the fabric of space and the fabrics in the body on the right. And we know a lot about these fabrics. We're learning about all of them. One of the fabrics has the geometry called sacred geometry. And I have to, at this point in my presentation, I have to take my clothes off.